Training isn't just a corporate checkbox anymore. It's a booming industry with the companies spending over 400 billion a year on employee learning. The real opportunity might be in building the programs, not just taking them.
Passion, inspiration, determination. Are you ready to jump into a better life? Welcome to our program, Jump Into It.
Today, we're joined with Michele
Presse,
CEO of the training company, to talk about how she turned her expertise into a thriving business, helping others learn and lead. Welcome to Jump Into It, the podcast that helps turn your vision into prosperity. Thank you, Michele, for joining us on Jump Into It.
Thank you for having me, Gabrielle.
So, what inspired you to get into this training and development? You've been doing it for a while, and I know you've been a CEO of the training company for about 12, almost 13 years. So you're really veteran. So you've seen the trends, you've lived through COVID, you've seen the big boom in the e-learning from classroom learning or face-to-face learning. So where you started and where it's going now, where's your passion?
Well, I was very fortunate early on in my career to get a job as a trainer at L'Oreal. So I started out in my early 20s as a hairstylist, and it was a lot of fun. I really loved working with people and the customer service side of it. And I had an opportunity to become a trainer with Redken, which is a professional division of L'Oreal. And the training that was provided to me at the time, very early on in that part of my career, was life-changing. L'Oreal and a lot of larger corporate organizations have the resources to provide exceptional training experiences. So you're really prepared to do your job super well. And those kinds of experiences I had not, had an opportunity to be part of previous to that. So when we would go into these classrooms with these amazing trainers, sometimes globally from all over the world, learning presentation skills and, train the trainer and how to engage and facilitate workshops. And, that was really powerful for me. And when I realized that this is what I wanted to do as a career, once I started, I quickly realized that even though companies like L'Oreal provide this incredible training, that wouldn't be enough to get me where I wanted to go, that I had to, invest in myself, and I had to look for where my own learning gaps were. And I think that's such a big thing, is just because you have a job in a certain organization doesn't mean they're going to provide you with everything you need if you want to grow. So True. I took the opportunity myself to take some presentation skills courses. I took a course around, it was a really fun one at one time around singing, actually, and doing, it was a really cool, it's kind of a train the trainer using stage fright examples. And so singing was often a big thing. So even though I wasn't a singer, it allowed me to really hone my presentation skills. So I went from these small workshops to be able to present in front of large audiences. And it wasn't very long when I had the opportunity to get a promotion. If I hadn't gone and taken that course, I wouldn't have been as confident. And so once I got promoted and I was working with larger audiences, I became director in a national role. I was able to step on the stage and do that, which I wouldn't have been before without the experience. So I feel really inspired to invest in myself and my own learning and what I needed to do to be able to be ready for these career advancements. So I think that's
interesting. So you had to train yourself to become good at training, which makes sense. But, it's interesting what you're saying, because you're doing singing. I've heard of improv, like Second City.
That's
helps
right.
you to be able to think quickly on your feet, to be able to present in front of a group of people. Training can come from different ways in order to package a message. I've heard TED Talks, Toastmasters, to help you to get rid of that stage fright.
Exactly. Yeah, and you have to practice. You can't just because you get a role and you have a certain responsibility and suddenly you're doing meetings in different marketplaces and different audiences that's not the place to practice. What I learned was these other types of things, like you said, even Toastmasters and Second City is a fabulous one to really hone those skills. So when you are in that role, you are shining. You are able to do the job that even though you might be new at it, it's really important. And often um, that type of responsibility is a little tough in the beginning till you get confident in doing that.
Well, they say most people that would rather be in the box than give the eulogy.
Exactly. That is a very, very common little analogy about being a trainer.
Yeah. Do you ever really get that overly comfortable in speaking in large groups of people?
I was very fortunate. I had a lot of amazing mentors and really experienced people around me. I was surrounded with a global team and a lot of really neat ideas. And so I think one of the things that I got out of the early part is, yeah, you always have butterflies, but I learned to look at those as excitement in a positive way. And I think that really also helped to be able to, walk up and be happy and confident and bubbly rather than so nervousness. So I think the
Mindset,
the
getting the right
mindset is
mindset. Yeah.
vital in how come across for sure.
We've moved to this e-learning. I've watched or joined into a lot of the e-learning, and you can have thousands of people on the platform with you and have this e-learning experience where you're no longer on a podium with 1,000 faces in seats looking at you. It's a big screen. And how have you felt in going through that transition with the learning? Were there challenges and opportunities? What was your experience?
Well, I think that's the biggest issue right now in the industry overall is that for a lot of organizations, there is no longer the opportunity to do in-person training and bring in teams, whether it's the cost of transportation. Even since COVID, so many people have moved away from where they would normally drive into work every day. So even teams that are on a 2-day in-office work schedule are just not all going to be in the same place at the same time. And so it's very difficult for organizations to coordinate in-person learning. That's number one. I think the second part of that is even the facilitators bringing someone in and managing all that. It's just not as cost effective. The challenge is if you're only doing things like e-learning, that's not as effective from a learning experience for people. So you need some kind of combination for both. We're working a lot with organizations who are trying to really take on more of I would say not only a blended approach, but really engaging a lot more people internally rather than having the one person in the company that was the trainer that held all the knowledge. It used to be in a binder for us. That was the one that imparted all the knowledge, where you're really trying to find opportunities to engage more with everyone has something to share. We can all learn from each other, and it's not just a linear stand and deliver. Here's the information, do the quiz at the end. There's a lot more involved now, and that's what I think makes it so much more complex for organizations. It's just not as simple.
That's new because there's a stat that 86% of companies using personalized learning report higher engagement. So, and having that blend model where it's not, as you were saying, one talking head and the others listening. It's really that blend can be e-learning one-to-one, but also within a group setting. And I think you and I had previous conversation about that experiential learning, where provocative questions and people going back and self-reflecting on it and then sharing the answers and insights that each of them are learning. So they're learning from each other and not just learning from one subject matter expert.
That's right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And for things like retention and just to even ensure that people got it right, like sometimes we misread things or misunderstand things. So if you're not doing those debriefs and the follow-ups and the discussions, then you can't be really sure that, people are learning what they need to. And I think you said something right in the beginning too, this whole self-directed piece. it's kind of like what I did very naturally, back in the day. Way that we learn or have learned as children through school is you're going to take this course and you learn this stuff and that's what you get. And the thinking, it has to be very different where we own what we need to learn. So I think for organizations, there's the fundamental, and I call it wants and needs, but really there's things that an organization needs to ensure their team has, especially things like compliance as an example. And I think as we're evolving, we need to make sure we're not just meeting those compliance check boxes, but we're teaching and training for competence. And that's where that self-directed piece, people have to identify the company needs us to learn ABC, but I want to learn DEFG. And so how does an organization ensure you're getting the compliance piece, that there's competence that goes with it, but also these opportunities are created to help people grow in their career path, and they take ownership of that. And I think that combination is really vital now. Can't just only offer employees just what the company needs them to learn if you don't have access to learning. And even it could be simple things like software. I shouldn't have to go try to find a video on YouTube how to do something in an Excel spreadsheet. I should have access to those resources so that they're, first of all, they're tried and true and tested. And that's
right. Yeah.
That's the other thing, is sometimes we can spend hours and hours searching for information or tools or tasks or things we need to learn, but it doesn't always come from a reputable place when we're looking on the internet for it. So we'll kind of go down a rabbit hole doing that. So if an organization can provide content that's going to be effective and that's trustworthy, that's really helpful to have that resource as well. And not everyone's going to do that extra piece. A lot of people only do what they have to for their job. But if you give people the opportunity to create their own learning path, you can really also identify those who are really invested and passionate about learning and growing in their career. And those are usually the ones you want to go to first to find out if they're ready for that next step as well.
There seems to be a trend around organizations prioritizing leadership development and more of those soft skills than just the hard skills. According to a training industry magazine, 73% of organizations prioritize leadership development over others. So that is a real jump. Where you talk about compliance, but it seems to be the steak and potatoes kind of basics.
Absolutely.
But the leadership and as you said, the importance of peers learning from each other. So there seems to be so many different shifts happening all at the same time around the learning.
Yes, and it's very much like presentation skills. If you don't have an opportunity to explore and try those leadership skills, if you don't have a conversation, I think that's where we're all right now. It seems that often people want to learn something and then be good at it. But there is a journey in between where you have to test things and try, and soft skills are the toughest for sure. We talk about you can only teach three things. One is knowledge, which is the easiest, and it's in lots of different formats. I can provide you a PDF with information about something, and you will have that knowledge if you read it and review it. Skill, you need a little bit more engagement, often depending on, if you think about welding skills, so that's different than Microsoft Word skills. So depending on what it is, you definitely need more engagement and supervision and feedback and direction. And yes, you're doing it right, or hold it different, or point it that way, or whatever it is. And that's really key. But the toughest thing is attitude, which is kind of what you're talking about. And it's different. You have a skill in leadership to, let's say, give someone constructive feedback or do a performance review. But your attitude towards that is what's going to really make a difference. So it's the same kind of thing. It takes practice, and even as a leader, you need to get feedback from the people you're leading. Even more so, I see leadership as almost an attitude. And you're teaching someone not just a skill, but an approach, the way to, it affects so many things: conflict resolution, dealing with difficult people, having those kinds of conversations. And the same thing, you can't just go take a course and be it. It takes
Yeah.
practice. It's just like standing up, and delivering a training to a large audience. There are, things that uh, you have to experience to really, get better at. And that's where the challenge is a lot of organizations, yeah, they want everyone to, have good leadership skills and be able to motivate and inspire their teams. But there's somewhere in between, you've got to cross that bridge. And how does that happen? And we're not, I don't think, getting as many opportunities to really engage, the way we
Do you
used to
think
when we
that's the
worked together.
biggest, do you think that's the biggest challenge? Because you hear people hire you on your skills and then fire you on your attitude.
Exactly. It's
Uh,
such a great saying. I'm going to use that
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
That's
And skills you can, like you were saying, so you can hone in on those. It's repetition, it's coaching to do that. But attitude is behavioral patterns, and like some of that is not a quick fix. How do you package that into an e-learning or even experiential learning? Your thoughts about that, Michelle?
I think it's very difficult, and it takes effort and planning. And I think one of the biggest things is understanding, getting some kind of feedback about where people are at, what they struggle with, what they feel they do well with, and identifying those things. I think we come from a culture where, again, we take a leadership course for 3 days and we go away to this great place. And people come back and think,
Yeah.
okay, you're a leader now. You took the course.
Right.
Don't you know how to do it?
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that what's really difficult is getting people are kind of closed to exposing what they don't know or not comfortable with. And so the more organizations can identify those things, make people feel comfortable with what they don't know, and that allows people to open up to learn those things and practice and try them. And so when we get into organizations where the expectation is there's no room for error, there's no room to say, I don't know how to do that. And that creates a lot of anxiety for people and a lot of frustration. And so I think that is the biggest challenge when teaching attitude. We talk about in learning and development, the 80-20 rule can apply to so many things, which in L&D, we look at 80% of the participants are going to take the training, put in all the effort, do the course from beginning to end, do the test, and get the job done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like the checkbox I was mentioning earlier, my own exploration around experimental learning or building communities. It has to start with trust. So
Absolutely.
if you are not trusting the people in your community, in your group, you're not going to share, you're not going to be open to new ideas.
That's right.
And without exposing that vulnerability, you don't make that change.
That's right. And that's a huge part of attitude, Gabrielle. That
Yeah.
is the essence of it. And that's what happens if you're working, if the person who's leading you doesn't trust you in your role, or you don't trust
Yeah.
them and feeling safe to say what you don't know, then everyone's sort of holding back, right? And that's where the big piece is, to really identify those things. And again, I think, the most important part is the needs assessment piece. It's not everything's cookie cutter. You can do a leadership course, but most people are coming to the table with vastly different experiences. They've come from a different organization, a different industry, different backgrounds, different culture. And so there's a fundamental piece where everyone can learn kind of the same content, but the bigger piece is identifying what people are confident in and what they're not. And if the more people open up and say, I'm not really comfortable giving feedback to someone or giving someone critical feedback. So how can I work through it? Unless they identify that, how do they become a better leader? So it's creating that safe and trusting environment is so key to get people to open up and share what they need to. And it inspires people to, like, I have to say, when I was going through that learning curve in the beginning of my career, I was so encouraged because I had a lot of support around me to help me grow. And right away in the beginning, if you don't know something, say that you don't know, but then go find out. Don't just say I don't know. And that
Yeah,
it really helps a lot of people to feel that it is okay. And I don't have to know everything, but I have to be accountable to go figure it out and then come back to it, whether it's to my boss or my client or my colleague, say, okay, I went to find out, I figured this out, and here's the answer now. You just don't leave it hanging. So if you have the confidence, again, you have an environment that encourages that and doesn't expect you to know because you took the course last week, it changes attitudes pretty dramatically. That it's exactly what you said. It's all about trust. Learning is about
because
trust.
if you get reprimanded, where when there's economic uncertainty, there's job uncertainty, unless you've got a environment where you can expose yourself to be vulnerable and say, hey, I don't get this. Or say, oh, I'm not good at this, as opposed to fake it till you make it kind of strategy, right?
I've done that before.
Right? I think we all have in some way. Maybe that's how you get the imposter syndrome. I don't know. You being open to where your shortcomings are or where you want to grow in areas, because there's always going to be that little bit of chaos and uncertainty and doubt until you get to the other side. And you've got to be able to have that support for you to take that journey so you can be better at whatever you are. Wherever you want to be. And a lot of times it's attitude, mindset.
Absolutely. And if it is the example which you said, and I think for us, for our organization, probably leadership training is one of the number one requests we get from organizations of every size and every level. It's a huge key component. We need to have good leadership for companies to be successful. But again, it can't, depending on your own background and experience and level of confidence, you can't only rely on your organization or your company to provide you with everything you need to be a good leader. You have to step outside of that and look beyond what the company is able to provide you. It's just not possible for organizations to do that. So things like reading great books, like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, or, Leaders Eat Last, and those kinds of books, like they can really have an impact, and you take what you need out of it. I remember talking to someone about, do you have a really good book you could recommend? And they said, you have to read a lot of different books on this topic. But if you can get one pearl from each book, then that one pearl of wisdom or one pearl of knowledge. So I've always remembered that. And I feel like sometimes even when I facilitate a training, I'll say, if you get one thing that made your job better, made it easier, a great idea that somehow you benefit from, then it's worth it. You can't expect, to think that you're going to come into any kind of training or a book or any kind of new information and think it's going to be the one thing you need to be great at this job or to know this particular area. Well, you have to, I think, really explore lots of different areas to really get what you need to succeed in that area. Leadership's a big one.
I like, I like what you're saying is that it's not just one go-to. And there's a lot of charlatans out there that are going to overpromise you that your world is totally going to transform. You're going to be a totally different person. You drop the 5,000, 10,000 for a weekend, and people get desperate. They've hit a wall in their lives, and they know that they need to make the change. Well, you know what? It took you a lifetime to get into the groove, into the pattern where you're at. It's not going to be a weekend that's going to reverse everything and untangle it, and you're going to transform. So, needing to be realistic. But I think what you're also saying, and I love hearing that, is that the wisdom doesn't come from one source and one experience.
That's right.
The wisdom is layered on and found in many different ways. It's through your peers. It's through books, audiobooks, it's through workshops. It's, it's the day-to-day experiences that wake you up to it. So,
and being open to evolving. The other thing I see a lot is, someone could be in a leadership role for a long time, but they're maybe still doing the same things they were doing 20 years ago. And that's not good either. They might do some things really well, but if you're not evolving and constantly being, sort of challenged with new ideas or new ways to do things, we stop growing sometimes. And then we see that things have changed around us. And you talk about multi-generational workforces or dealing with that multi-generational colleagues sometimes. And if we don't kind of embrace doing things in a new way as we go on, we can't be thinking the way, like it's not, training is a great example. We're not doing in-person training, for 90% of what we do anymore. And so adapting as trainers even has been a huge challenge for a lot of people that have been doing it for a long time. I've seen a lot of trainers, facilitators retire through pandemic just because they weren't willing to learn how to do Zoom, or virtual training, or try to figure out the whole e-learning or build e-learning courses to get to their audience. So some people just are not open to adapting. And that's a big thing. I think if you're in learning and development, you have to always be open to doing things in a new way.
That's
a mindset.
And it's interesting. Yeah, it's a mindset, always being open, always being curious, always trying to find the opportunities in what you're seeing, and not looking at it as, oh, another challenge, another burden that I've got to bear. And when I look at the way that society and our retention span is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. I'm in marketing and communications where I would see we developed communications, and it used to be like these long paragraphs. Now it's sound bites. Now it's bullets, and the platforms like Instagram, like where you get the messages out really succinctly, honor the shorter attention span that we have. And it was just interesting because I was looking at microlearning effectiveness. This is something that is a trend here. Microlearning boosts retention to 20 to 30%. So it's not just in marketing, it's not just in social media, it's in learning too.
Absolutely. And I think even more so, we don't have the attention span, but also we don't have the retention of information to sit down and take a 3-hour course, especially if it's e-learning. When you do an in-person course and you're engaging and you're having discussions about a topic with, the person sitting beside you, what did you think of that? What did you get out of it? What would you do different? Have you ever done that before? Or seen it? You keep these discussions really have an impact on retention, but sitting and passively, and regardless of e-learning, if there's engagement and you're having to click on things or watch a video and then answer a question, yes, e-learning can be very engaging, but if it's too long, just like virtual training, we're sitting in front of these computers, the retention is very low. And so microlearning is really great. You can do little sound bites and then go back to things, or little microlearning bites, and then go back to it and review it. And I think, again, that piece around retention, but the longer an e-learning course is, the less likely you're going to have retention. It's better to do it in smaller chunks. I say it's like a buffet. You don't do the whole buffet at once, you just do little bits at a time.
For those that want to develop some training program, what would be some of the tips that you would recommend? So we talked about e-learning, we talked about learning from peers, we talked about blending e-learning with person to person or face to face. What would be the things that build a successful learning program in today's world?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. Obviously, the content is king, like anything within marketing, and you'll know that. So if you're building any kind of e-learning course in itself, you have to have really good information, and it should be pretty succinct. People don't want to read. I've seen some e-learning that's just filled with words, and that's not going to be effective, right? So if there's a lot of content, a lot of information, how to break it down, again, more into micro-learning. So even if you have 30 modules and they're 5 minutes each, people can consume them rather than one module that's an hour and a half long. So that's really helpful. For what I think is going to be really important for organizations, as we transition into this more blended learning, less in-person learning, is to have discussion or some kind of information seeking, whether it's filling out a survey or some kind of feedback, is to identify, we call it a needs assessment, but if you have, let's say, 5 specific learning objectives your organization wants to ensure that the team learns, you have to start out finding out what they know to start with, because If
Mm,
if if there are
mhm.
people
Yeah.
that already have the knowledge, having them repeat something that they don't need is a waste of time and money. So the needs assessment piece is really key. And I think the other elements are to have a lot of discussion throughout the learning to really ensure that people have learned. And then to have what I would call a debrief. You do a post assessment and identify what people got out of it compared to what they started with. And that's always a good
Mhm.
way, uh, to really know, because sometimes you don't know, you don't remember what you actually learned. When you're learning something, you can't remember what it was like not to know it. So you can't, it's,
Yeah.
if you don't ask people at the beginning where they're at the
Hmm.
end, you can't kind of go back at the end. So at the end of the training, again, to sort of say, okay, where are you at now? Look at, and then identify where the gaps are for future. But retention of information is only happens when you review it and discuss it. Otherwise,
Hmm.
you don't really know if people have retained what they've learned. So I would say that in building any kind of content, building in opportunities for people to debrief, review, discuss, share best practices, or what do you recommend to do, or how do you do it? How do you do differently than I do? And then, what would you not do? Those kinds of discussions are going to be what is the most important piece of any learning. But people in silos doing e-learning, there's not a lot of benefit from it. It works if to go do the e-learning course, and then we're going to have a discussion around what you thought of it. What did you
Hmm.
think, was effective? Were there any pieces missing? What would you do something differently? And having those kinds of conversations. And so the self-directed piece, as you talked about, giving people, so this is what the company needs you to learn, but then giving people opportunity who have an appetite to learn more to do that, and creating what I would call informal learning experiences, and they don't have to be long, where people can engage each other on that particular topic. If companies do that, they'll have a lot more retention and results from it. One example, we worked with Retail Council of Canada, and one of the recommendations was a lot of retail stores have what they call rally meetings in the morning. So they may not bring someone and do a big learning and development session, but in your rally meeting, you can talk about certain topics. So one of the challenges right now is a lot of these aggressive thefts that are happening in retail stores. So it's one
Yeah.
thing to send someone to an e-learning course to deal with a real life situation. That's not always going to equate, right? So what to do now, you have the knowledge, and maybe
Yeah.
you have a situation and now you have the skill. But again, is your attitude going to be I'm confident, or I'm afraid, or what
Hmm.
is that? And so the only way you identify that and really fill in the gaps is to have those conversations. So in a retail space, having just a 5 minute in a rally meeting, oh, you took the course, what did you get out of it? What are you still uncomfortable with? Where do you think we still need to work on, where are those gaps? So it's a constant conversation. Didn't happen as
Hmm.
much before because we had this one facilitator who was going to come and bless us all with the knowledge we
Yeah.
needed for whatever the topic was.
Yeah. Well, and I think role playing also in those examples,
Yes,
because like you said, it can be a textbook. Well, if you say this, then I say this. Well, in real life, you've got emotions, you've got body language happening, you've got a lot more there that you've got to think about and
absolutely.
react
Well,
to.
and we're looking at some neat things right now. I think one of the things that we're going to see is a lot more virtual reality training coming up as well.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
again, where
That's a
individuals can
good
do it
point.
on their own time. We're actually looking at these really neat, inexpensive goggles. They're not even really goggles, but where people can have more of an engaged experience. So if it's customer service, for example, you have to have those responses. You're actually going to, it's almost going to be like the person is standing in front of you rather than looking at like a PowerPoint style learning on a screen. So I think there's going to be a lot of new things that come up that way too that will help to fill in some of those gaps where we don't have that in-person experience, but we can still have a different type of more engaging learning opportunity.
That's a really like metaverse, right? Where you
That's
You
right.
submerge yourselves into a whole different environment.
Mhm.
Because I was going to ask you about visual aid, submerging yourself into a virtual setting to really, put yourself into a greater sense of
Real situation. You're talking about role playing, and we also talk sometimes about real. You do it as if you're really doing it, right? Sometimes people feel like they're acting. It's not quite the same experience, but the virtual reality is. We've looked
yeah.
at some courses for caregivers that work with people with Alzheimer's and dementia. What a great opportunity to actually go
Hmm.
through some of these scenarios in a virtual setting rather than in real life, because it can be really intimidating and frightening. So if you've had a couple
Hmm.
times, so okay, I know what to expect, and I know how I'm going to respond in some of these situations, it's way more powerful than doing an e-learning course.
Interesting. You think you're going to have virtual operations training, a virtual?
Absolutely. I think it's much sooner than I would have ever anticipated it because of COVID. It's just pushed us into
Yes.
this. Again, in person is there's nothing that's better. Engaging
Mm,
conversations, discussions, that's
mhm.
the way
It's
humans
true.
learn is with others. We
Yeah.
don't learn on our own. We learn with others. So I think the
Yes.
virtual reality is going to be a huge factor in the future with learning. I mean, it's definitely been a gaming world, a lot of investment in gaming, but I'm seeing now a lot of
Mm-hmm.
organizations investing in building out virtual reality training. So once we have more access to the actual
The technology,
the
right? Yeah.
technology piece,
Right.
that's right.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
once that becomes more financially feasible for organizations, I think we're going to see a lot.
How is AI impacting the learning and the training?
I think in a few ways, from the technology perspective, without a doubt. We look at a learning management system where you have all your content, could be your company's product knowledge, standards of practice, it could be compliance training, it could be software training or what have you. There's so much AI built in, whether it's finding a course that you need or uh, quiz generators or knowledge checks or identifying. So, for example, like if you go on our LMS and you have been taking management courses, well, suddenly you'll see it'll start to recommend related topics. You're obviously in a
Yeah.
management role, you're looking at, so it'll keep recommending things. You can create learning paths. I think that's really going to have an impact. It is part of that self-directed learning piece. So you get here, the company needs you to take ABC training, and whether it's safety or compliance or company policies, onboarding, things like that. But then things that you want to take related to your career path or, where you're wanting to go in the future will be really, way more accessible that way. And you can put in what you want, so you can consume what you want instead of it all being predetermined for you. So I think we're going to see, like you said in the beginning, a lot more um, self-directed, individualized learning plans that will come out of it as well because of AI. And then the third piece, which I'm really seeing, is it's just phenomenal to use to build content. So if you were looking at a cybersecurity course right now on for people in accounts payable to recognize fake invoice and things like that,
Mhm.
the kinds of engagement and activities and ideas that come from AI are really fun. But you still need an instructional designer to map out the course. So it's
Mhm.
not necessarily going to change those roles so much, but the way that those roles use those resources and the kinds of content that's coming out is really, really, really cool.
Yeah,
Those are
yeah.
the three
The
areas I
AI is a
see AI.
great data aggregator to be able to pull information
Absolutely.
very quickly, very succinctly, and then being
Mm-hmm.
able to narrow filter down to the point of what you want. Yeah.
Yeah, and I see too, like for example, even in those retail environments, just to go into AI and say, give me 3 discussion topics on the latest strategies around dealing with uh, aggressive theft, as an example. Sometimes you just need to generate discussion topics that you can share with your team. And if you're not an instructional designer or facilitator, that can be difficult. And so if you're not getting the training for your team, how do you go out and resource it yourself as a manager or a supervisor? So I think there's a lot of really neat ways it can be used to really enhance the training for even the challenges for small and medium-sized organizations. Frankly, large corporations, they've got this covered. They have, the resources and the finances and the people and the bandwidth to build, to continue. And that's not going to change. It's like what I got exposed to at L'Oreal. It's the smaller companies that, and I think as you talked about, you're an entrepreneur, you're trying to run your company. There's the mandatory stuff that you have to do in that. It's mandatory, of course, but how do you get that next part? And I think that's where we'll see a lot more opportunities, but more accessible content and learning experiences for smaller organizations. Maybe wouldn't have had the opportunity to have that before.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I agree. Even just before our jump into podcast, I went on ChatGPT and I said, give me questions about the trends and where the training is going. And there you have like 15 points. Give me the resources where to make sure that I can research more. And you get it in a minute or two. Right, where it would have been years ago, it would have taken me a few hours to do it and verify the sources and
right,
and
absolutely,
pull in the content and make it really succinct. So we're that's just all more about tightening the speed to get things done at a much faster rate and having the tools at hand to do more immediately. And like you were saying, directed training, or you would have to do so much research to be able to pull in the information in order to map out for yourself training course or programs. And now it can be done virtually so quickly. It's amazing.
So
it's
quickly.
amazing. It's amazing. It's a
is.
good thing, but a lot of people are going, "Oh, my job," right? So,
yeah, I think there definitely will be some impacts in certain roles, but it doesn't take away a job. It just really enhances it, and I think makes what what can do even
makes
better.
it smarter. Makes it smarter.
That's a great way to describe it. Sometimes and as long as you check everything that's told.
It's true. Yeah, you have to still check it.
Sometimes it can make you look not smart at all.
True. All right. So as we're wrapping up, if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of career or leadership advice, what would it be?
I think for me, I would say it's okay not to know what you don't know. I think that was always really hard for me because I felt I should know, or I should be the one that knows, especially when you get promoted into a role. Sometimes you don't have that time to really get good at it quickly. So you have to be able to, be confident that even if you don't know, you'll figure it out. So I think that was the thing. I struggled, or I felt maybe uncomfortable in certain situations because I thought that I should know by,
Well, that's great advice. That's great advice because as long as you're open to saying, I don't know, means you're curious enough to go and get the answers. I think
that's key. But sometimes we don't want to say that because we feel uncomfortable or embarrassed or awkward situations. And I think that's the biggest thing is once you're able to say, I don't know, it's very empowering.
It is empowering, right? You may be in the boardroom or group. I don't want to ask that question because then everybody will know I don't know, right?
Exactly. And now I feel like it's sort of, I want to be able to say, no, I don't know that, but I want to know.
But then you'll never know because you didn't ask the question.
And sometimes also you end up doing things differently than you could have because you didn't ask or you didn't put yourself out there. And so in the end, it catches up with you. So it's always good. So I would say that I would be more confident in saying I don't.
Thank you so much, Michele, for being a guest on Jump Into It. So if somebody wants to get to know a little bit more about you and about your company, can you share some information on how they could contact you?
Absolutely. So our website is trainingcompany.ca. So that's an easy one. You can always catch me on LinkedIn. Gabrielle, I'm not sure if in the end we can throw up a QR code or something like that. That might be a way to do it.
Well, I'll put a URL in the description so people,
Perfect.
whether you're listening on a podcast or through YouTube, you can link on to find out a little bit about Michele and about her business, the training company. Thank you again,
Thank
Michele,
you
for being a
too. A
guest. This has been
pleasure.
very interesting. It's, I've learned more, and I'm not afraid to ask to learn more.
Good, 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 good. I love it. If that was the one thing, and that's what learning is all about, is being curious, right?
Yes,
And I think if
yes.
we're curious,
At Jump
then
Into It, we empower business
really
owners, marketers, and
And then you
entrepreneurs
never
to
grow
turn
old,
their dreams
right?
into
That's
You never
reality.
grow
right.
old.
Want to
Exactly.
supercharge your marketing
Exactly.
efforts? Join our
Thank you so
expert-led
much,
training at
Gabrielle.
You're welcome.
360
You're
integral
welcome. So thank you again.
and
And
get
for our next
practical
show, we'll
tools
have
you
another
can use
fabulous
right away.
guest whose
Don't
journey is
miss
sure
out.
to
Get ready
inspire us.
to
To
jump
learn more,
into it.
join or jump into it. The courage and knowledge. Ready to jump into it. Thank you for listening.
At Jump Into It, we empower business owners, marketers, and entrepreneurs to turn their dreams into reality. Want to supercharge your marketing efforts? Join our expert-led training at 360integralmarketing.com and get practical tools you can use right away. Don't miss out. Get ready to jump into it. At Jump Into It, we empower business owners, marketers, and entrepreneurs to turn their dreams into reality. Want to supercharge your marketing efforts? Join our expert-led training at 360integralmarketing.com and get practical tools you can use right away. Don't miss out. Get ready to jump into it.